Good morning. Hello to everybody who's joining us. So this is a bit of a weird time slot. I don't usually stream on Thursdays, but I was having so many issues with my internet and all sorts of stuff yesterday, so I just wasn't able to get it done. Hopefully, I don't have those same issues today. It's looking good so far. So just let me know in the comments if there's like any hiccups with the video or the audio or anything like that. But my idea today was to take these kind of like loops and stuff that I've created for a previous tutorial video. It's just like two main loops with a bunch of stuff in there. Most of it's actually just like muted, just to kind of like add more stuff in. And my idea now is to kind of like flesh it out into a full arrangement. Generally, I find, when stepping into these kind of like production sessions, it really helps to have a direction to kind of head towards. So I've already kind of prepared like an idea of what sort of arrangement I kind of want to create. But using these kind of like blank clips on an audio track, I have done this in a previous video and explained the whole technique and why I go about doing it this way. But you don't have to follow this exact kind of arrangement that you predetermine. You can always change it later on. If you're busy working with something and you feel like you want to extend something, you can just do that very easily. And I find it helps to separate these into different timelines, so you can quickly and easily see like what's going on, and also just take it away if you need. But anyway, so the section that was playing now is hey guys, for anyone who's joining us now. So the idea here is this section is a sort of like main section. There's a lot going on. It's like full percussion and all sorts of stuff like that. And you don't necessarily want to bring that in, right at the beginning of the track. You obviously want to give the DJ or the listener some sort of time to build up to that kind of like main, the main energy of the track. So what I kind of want to do here is use these parts that we've already created. I'm probably not going to create any new sounds for this in this video, but I'm going to take what we've already created and just kind of like create other variations and stuff on those. But I think the exercise here is to, see how much you can get done with the tools that are available, which I think is a very resourcefulness is a very powerful thing to know as a producer. And when you're limited to certain things, like it can have benefits in terms of creating a much quicker workflow. So I might not outline that completely in this video because this is live, so I may have some hiccups. But generally, like I said, when you prepare a project with all the elements that you're going to need, then arranging it from there should be one or two sessions, and then sit down and mix thereafter. So hopefully I'm going to be able to show you guys kind of how quick it is to work in this kind of like workflow. But yeah, like I said, you can see pretty much everything has been pre-prepared. It's all WAV files, just to make things a little bit easier and to ease up CPU usage, so we can like do all sorts of other processing stuff. But anyway, generally speaking, we don't want to, like I said, go straight into the balls to the walls crazy right at the beginning of the track. I kind of like to save that for like the 3-4 minute mark, and then just switched to Ableton and it's fast and easy. What were you using before, Stanzin? Because I love Ableton because of the kind of like very intuitive approach that it's got. But when Ableton came out, I was already so kind of, I was so far into Cubase that to learn something completely new, I'd have to teach myself all these kind of like workflow things all over again. But yeah, I've been enjoying Bitwig a lot. It's kind of like the halfway mark between something like Cubase, which is very, editing and mixer focused, and something like Ableton, which is very playable, FL Studio. It's a weird one. I was actually on FL Studio before I moved to Cubase, and I'll probably get some hate in the comments for this, but I actually kind of prefer FL Studio as like a first step into music production than something like Ableton. Ableton is great and it's very intuitive, but FL Studio just has that little bit of edge, which is a little bit easier for beginners to understand. But yeah, I guess it's, whatever you use to get the job done is the DAW that is best, I think. So anyway, I've got these kind of like FM kind of sounds that I've created here. And I want to use these and chop them up and create a bunch of variations using like delays and stuff like that to create these kind of like atmospheres before the actual sound comes in. So let's see here. It's the sound over here. So let's say, for example, we've got like a breakdown here before like the main section comes in with all those things, and we don't want such a sort of sharp percussive sound because we want to create more of a kind of breakdown. One thing I like to do is create, a bunch of delay effects and then chop the sound up. Let me show you here. So let's actually just first put on a delay effect. And then I like to use the scissor tool, and when you hold Alt, you can like cut it you can kind of like divide it into equal sections. And then let's actually just remove a couple of these bars. There's like a filter rise here, so we're just going to get a couple of these. And then just lay them out, sort of progressively along the timeline like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use that delay to create a kind of like atmospheric variation of the sound, but the kind of tonality is going to be the same. So when it comes in over here, we're going to kind of recognize it again, which is a pretty cool effect I like to use. So when using these like chopped audio bits, it's important to remember to fade in and fade out just a little bit on each of them, because you don't want like little bits of clicks coming through, which you may not pick up when listening to it, in a layer with other channels. So this is cool. We've created like an atmospheric kind of effect with the same sound as the one that's going to come in over here. And we can use this to kind of bring it into that part. Say, for example, we've got like a part here which will just be like kick and bass, then with that synth playing over. Cool. So that's a really cool way of like tying two sections together which don't have any kind of like relevant material already. But one thing to note that like I pretty much use all the time when arranging my tracks is I identify these kind of like main parts. So here, for example, would be like this bass line with these synths and stuff, and then I created like a varying bass line over here. So what I'll do is I'll kind of like split these two parts up. Let's actually just maybe split it up even more so we've got more space to work with in between. And what I'll do is I'll work backwards. So I will, for example, start to take out elements and, work backwards so that when each of these parts comes in, you get this kind of like overall progression that always sounds like something sensible is kind of coming in, because you've already prearranged that kind of like master loop, if that makes sense. So let me just see if I can kind of outline that. Like here, let's say, on this drop, let's not bring in these main hi-hats yet. And then we can bring them in over here after this whole passage. Let me just loop these. Okay, I can unmute those. Okay, that is looped. Cool. sorry about that. So yeah, sometimes like my button is a bit finicky. So like sometimes when I press it, it double taps and like mutes and mutes back again. um, so what was I saying? um, so yeah, the cool thing here is like I'm not sure if I outlined it for you guys when doing it now. When playing with these loops, but if you've kind of like prearranged a kind of like master loop section with all these different elements that kind of sound good and relate to each other rhythmically, you know, when you start to take parts out and add other parts in, and play around with like which of these loops are playing, you can remove stream delay. What are you talking about? Is there a delay between the mic and the video? Because sometimes there is a bit of a delay, but then it fixes it like after the stream, like when it encodes it and stuff. Or it could just be my settings. I was playing around with a lot of stuff yesterday to try get my internet to work. I might have messed something up. I'm not the most technical with computers and networking and stuff. But anyway, so it's almost like you've created these kind of like sensible building blocks, and then you're kind of like building a structure, you know, almost like Lego bits, and you've already created them all to like fit together, you know. So it just makes life a little bit easier when you kind of want to create these variations. You don't have to like jump back into, you know, the actual preset and start to tweak things. You've already done a lot of the work beforehand. So for example, like here, you'll notice there's 4 layers of this one sound, and they're all slightly different. Like for example, I've got this main loop, which is, I think, just the sound that I created playing one long bar without any kind of like modulation or building kind of automation. And then there's like other various ones with different types of automation in the actual patch. So what I generally do is like with a main lead type of sound or like a main interest in the track that I'm trying to create, I'll generally bounce out a couple of variations of like automation patterns, just like in case I need to use them in this like arrangement type of fashion. So I won't have to then go back to, you know, actually open up the VST, recreate the sound and all sorts of stuff like that. And I find it helps to, you know, when you do these types of things, it helps to, you know, you become a little bit more creative with moving from one part to another, because now you've got the option to already. It's now easier for you, so you don't think, oh, it's a hassle for not much value that you're getting out for it. You've already done it, so you may as well just try it and see if it works with the track, you know. So yeah, for example here, let me show you, like, I think these are it's like a 3-layered sound. I'm going to do a video. I recorded it the other day on how I made the sound. But essentially, it's like 3 layers, and for each of these like sections, there's a different filter applied to like a different layer. And I believe this is just like the one layer with that filter coming in, and then this is like the multi-layer effect, if that's kind of making sense. So what we can do here is, you know, to kind of dumb things down and work backwards a little bit, we can kind of introduce this single layer filter effect over here, and maybe do it twice before the main kind of build of that sound starts to come in. So let me actually just show you guys what it sounds. So you see, it's like just the mid layer from this kind of like multi-layer effect. And then here is a different variation. So we could even create like a slight variation on like each of these, for example, like use this one to lead it into the break where the synth then, like the mid synth becomes a lot more present, and then into the more sort of rhythmic part after that. Um, So I just noticed something now, and this is completely by chance. I didn't actually plan this, but the rhythm of that kind of like mid FM sound sounds like it's going to the exact same rhythm as this kind of like serum saw distorted saw lead that I created. And I didn't actually use the same MIDI pattern, but I think what's happened there is I kind of created this MIDI pattern around the kind of rhythmic FM hits that were already in the track. So, for example, like here, you'll see it goes da 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 da, and then how I did that was I saw, okay, there's a FM or a rhythmic kind of grid hit here and here, so I just did notes in between those. And I created a similar thing with that like mid FM sound, and the result was just the same kind of like pattern. And again, this is why it's kind of cool to create a kind of like master loop and then dumb it down from there, because these kind of sounds generally just fit themselves into place. So yeah, that's just a little cool thing that happened by chance. I'm gonna go get a coffee refill quick while I let this play on loop. Let me know if you guys have any questions and stuff so far. Okay, so no more questions. Yeah, it seems like the delay is always different. Like while it's streaming live, but then sometimes like after it encodes, then it like fixes up. Well, at least that's what happened with my last video. So what I want to do here is let's actually open up Snapheap, and I want to use this what's it called, resonator, and I want to create a kind of like pad sound using the actual source of this kind of like percussive sound here. Some really magic pad. It's chimey. Let me find it for you, and I can try remember. So I think all my atmospheric type things are here. It's not the dog. I guess it's probably that one that you're talking about. I think that's a pad I made in Serum, just like doing all sorts of weird things with the noise and detuning oscillators and stuff. So it's like kind of out of tune, but it still has this cool like texture. So when you high pass it, hey, my dogs are going wild today. Is it this one, Bill? Because I think that's like white noise with a high resonance and all sorts of random stuff on the pitch. So it's like doing weird kind of atonal stuff. But, you know, when you high pass it, those kind of like fundamentals disappear. So you can layer it over and not get that kind of like detuned effect as much. I don't want to go through all my presets now to try and find it. But what I can do is let me actually just write it down, and then I'll remember to try and do like a tutorial video on that particular sound. One sec. My memory's bad, so I gotta write this stuff down. Cool. Back to business. So this Shadow. So here, I believe the track is in A, but I want to actually turn it down to the lower octave A. It's a bit high over there, and then play around with these to get like a sort of paddy effect with the same kind of texture as this kind of rhythmic FM sound. We may want to put like reverbs and filters and stuff after that as well, but let's just play around with this for a bit. If you're wondering why I didn't just put the filter in Snap Heap, it's just because I didn't feel like I'm lazy. I didn't feel like assigning the macro. So I just loaded the actual filter as a standalone plugin, so I could just assign the automation. That's one of the cool things about Phaseplant and Snap Heap and Multipass is all the plugins, all the like effects and stuff are available as like single standalone things as well, for just these kind of like quick tasks. So did you notice there, when the hi-hats come in, it's like, it gets to a point where it's almost like, are these hi-hats ever going to come in? And then boom, they're in, and it's like, it's almost like the final layer in your percussions. Generally like to leave that kind of like as late as possible, because by kind of extending the time at which it comes in, it makes it much more impactful when it actually comes in. And it's something that I've noticed, like a lot of guys, they'll, the track will start, kick and bass comes in, next bar, full percussions are in. And it's almost like you've got no sort of space to move then. The track is already at full dynamics. And the only thing you can do to kind of vary the track is to change the sounds that are in the track, rather than to, work with this kind of like natural tension building by removing very simple elements and bringing them back in again. If we look at like the sort of beginning of dance music, with just like very simple drum machines, like all you had to work with was the sound and muting it live on the spot. And that's kind of how these like classic electronic drum grooves and stuff came to be. And a lot of these kind of like techno and trance and these styles of drops and these styles of arrangements and stuff came to be from like the equipment that was, classic at the time when these genres were first like conceived and stuff. Well, at least I believe. So also, how long has it been? An hour. It's not the best track that I've ever made, but considering it's taken us an hour to get like the arrangement to a point where the parts are flowing, and I'm much happier with it as a full track than I was before. When I started the stream, it was just 2 loops, and now it kind of feels like a cohesive arrangement. Now it's the neighbor's dogs going wild, not just mine. It feels like a much more sort of cohesive arrangement. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that I still have to add, like some sound effects, some sort of risers, and that kind of thing. But that being said, I generally don't like to rely on those kinds of things to create like tension. I feel it's much more effective and much more kind of musical to use the parts that are there like at your disposal. So, for example, like I'm saying with the hi-hat thing, often when you're listening to, it's quite a thing with like full on, where the track will start and it's already full on. It's like kick, bass, full percussion, snares, everything from the beginning of the track. And the only kind of technique that you then have to add to build to create these tensions in the movement of the track is using sound effects and that kind of thing. Because, if you start to remove elements, then the track kind of slows down a bit. But if you start with a kind of slower sort of track and build it up to a point where you've got this kind of natural tension, I feel it's much more effective. And you can get away without using, these white noise risers and all sorts of stuff like that. But just thoughtfully arranging, the parts in your track. So definitely, try that out, before defaulting to, the sort of white noise sound effects and drops and builders and all sorts of stuff like that. Try to do it the sort of natural way by bringing the sounds in a sort of sensible manner and at the right time as well. So, here, for example, the hi-hats came in only at around like 4.5 minutes, which might be a little bit late, but here, I'm probably going to end up removing this first 33 bars and starting the track here. So let's just see. So like technically the hi-hats would be coming in at around like 3 minutes or 30 and 35 seconds, which is generally the time that kind of like my main sort of the main track is like at its peak, is like in the halfway mark, and then kind of drop it down a bit and then bring it back up to that same sort of level of tension before bringing it down to the end of the track here. And we've even gone a little bit overboard here. We've gone a little bit long, so we can start to now find these parts which are not as important in the overall, story of the track. I feel like this beginning part does drag on a little bit, but that being said, that can help to, create this much more sort of tension in the last section of the track. But it's all about a balance. You can't have like a very slow arrangement and then after the drop it suddenly balls to the walls. So again, it helps to have this kind of pre-decided idea beforehand, because then you don't get stuck into these little like workflow motions. You kind of decide, okay, I want to create this type of movement or passage in the music, and you generally stick to it. I mean, here I did alter it a little bit. As you can see, I dropped back to the same bass line before, after the drop, but then changed it again. So that's also another thing that is quite a powerful technique is, after the drop, where you kind of expect the track to be at its peak, don't kind of peak it yet. So say, for example, build, 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 and then drop it into like a flat bass line, and then restart the build here, and then only like a couple of bars later, bring in your main arrangement with a new bass line and all sorts of stuff like that. It's almost like you're creating these kind of like bits of tension, and you're releasing it a bit, but still keeping some of that tension going to, create a kind of like avalanche effect almost. So I'm probably blabbering now. But I'm sure you guys get the picture. I mean, I did the same thing here as well. It's something that I like to use quite often because, say for example, you're the listener and you're listening to the track and you're like, oh, it's building. This is the part, this is my tune. And then it comes in and it's like, yeah, that's the jam. But then it builds up again and it's like, bam, it hits you again with the feels. That's kind of what I try to create with these, build up and then, down one level kind of situations. So yeah, I think I've kind of outlined the idea of these kind of like workflow arrangement sessions that I do. So I'm just going to let it loop for a bit while I play around with a couple of the things that I've added. If there's any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll probably start wrapping it up in about 10 minutes or so. So yeah, fire away. Thank you, Noche Astral. Very much appreciated for the super chat and for the kind words. Thank you so much.
his brain. A strange electrical transmission turns out Elliot was indeed tripping on LSD. Strange electrical transmission that happened inside his brain. Took you on a long, strange trip.
So the rumor is part of it was dipped in LSD.
Awesome. I'm actually pretty impressed with how that came out for 1 hour and 15 minutes of semi-working at it. Yeah, I'm going to head out. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Thank you, Noche Astral, for the super chat and the kind words. Very much appreciated. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I will see you guys next week.